Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for May 25th, 2022. Let's begin with the fact that it's time that we face some very hard truths about the collapse of the Western paradigm, the so-called transatlantic region, which is committed to war with Russia and China now, according to Joe Biden, at the same time that its financial system is imperiled by inflation, by an unsustainable debt burden, and the physical economy is deteriorating. Doesn't sound like a very good plan, but that's their plan and they're doubling down on it. Now, this was reflected in comments by Nikolai Patrushev, who's the secretary of Russia's Security Council. And I'm going to quote from him because what he says is quite important in terms of facing these truths. He said, quote, "The Anglo-Saxon style has not changed for centuries. They keep dictating their conditions to the world, arrogantly ignoring the sovereign rights of countries. While hiding their actions behind the rhetoric of human rights, freedom, and democracy, they push ahead with the golden billion doctrine, which implies that only a select few are entitled to prosperity, while the plight of everybody else is to toil away for the sake of their well-being. That is, the well-being of the few," unquote. Now, this is the arrogance that we see highlighted at the ongoing World Economic Forum conference in Davos, Switzerland. The Anglo-American establishment, which now includes most of the leaders of Europe, are aware that a new paradigm is emerging because their paradigm is collapsing. Being stuck in a disintegrating paradigm is not a particularly useful place to be. But the question that you have to ask is how do they intend to keep their collapsing system afloat? The Great Reset and the Green New Deal, which they're committed to, which is their policy, will produce no real net growth. In fact, it's rapidly cannibalizing the foundations for growth which were laid after World War II. It's a result of neoliberal economics, which then is defended by global neoconservative military policy. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov yesterday said that the Russian-Chinese economic ties are deepening as a result of the Western scorched earth policy. And he said together they will develop the Far East and Eastern Siberia with new technologies, including nuclear fusion. This was greeted by a spokesman from the Chinese Foreign Ministry who said that, quote, "Our cooperation is not aimed against any third party," unquote, but to promote a multipolar world, opposing, quote, "hegemonic behavior and bloc confrontation," unquote. The Chinese policy has been one of inclusion, of bringing other nations into the Belt and Road Initiative as partners, including Russia, including South Asian countries, the same ones that Biden is now trying to bring into an anti-China coalition. And so far it appears as though he was not very successful in his trip. This new paradigm is supported by most of the former colonies in the developing sector. The ones that are backing the United States and NATO against Russia are ones that are desperately poor and are hoping for a handout to survive. But increasingly, even the poorest nations are saying that it's not worth it to get the handout to give up their sovereignty. And that's where we see the potential for a shift. Now, meanwhile, while this is going on, we see a couple of signs of the senility of the West. One was 98-year-old Henry Kissinger at Davos, seemingly sounding rational, saying we've got to end the war in Ukraine. But what's his reason? The same reason he had behind his initial geopolitical maneuvers in the 70s to split Russia against China. He said we have to unite with Russia to prevent it from allying with China. Well, as one of my colleagues said, that train has already left the station. There's already a China-Russia alliance. As we heard from Lavrov and the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman, It's primarily economic, and it's open to all other countries. Whereas the Western, the US, British neoliberal system is only open to those countries that are willing to crawl on their knees to London and Wall Street and accept the International Monetary Fund technocrats whose policies have already strangled most of the world's developing sector. So as this babbling is going on, we have Biden with his own babbling. And when he's coherent, he speaks as though his words as US president have no consequences. Just a few examples. Committing the United States to a military defense of Taiwan, as he did in this Asia trip, makes no sense. China is not about to invade Taiwan. They're looking toward a peaceful unification. But if we go in there guns blazing, we probably will get a war, which will not be in our advantage. Secondly, he's touting non-existent trade agreements with Asian partners. The Asian countries listened to him politely, but no agreements were signed, and the US has very little to offer now except threats that if you don't join us, you'll be swallowed up by China. Biden is praising the, quote, heroic freedom fighters of Ukraine, saying they won the Battle of Kiev, which never took place, except maybe in the fantasy of Western media and Western military analysts. And he also defended the heroic defenders of Mariupol, the bulk of whom have been exposed by the Russians to be Hitler-loving, swastika-tattooed Nazis. Biden is continuing to talk about his plans to combat inflation. Well, how's he going to do that? Prices continue to rise. More Americans are facing desperate conditions where they can't pay for food, can't pay for transportation. Farmers can't pay for diesel. People can't pay for health care. This is the sign of a collapsing empire. And then finally, he reaffirmed his commitment to provide more weapons to Ukraine at a point where we can't even provide baby formula to American mothers. So with more and more Americans angry and frustrated, and the rest of the world rejecting this Western arrogant imperial policy, the time has come for us to rally those desperate Americans and Western Europeans behind LaRouche's 4 laws. These are the real solutions to the crisis. Physical economy based on the proven principles of the American system, which includes banking regulation. That means no more bailouts. It means no more defense of speculators. If you want to speculate, it's your business. If you lose, you're not going to get bailed out, and you're not going to get liquidity pumped into you from the Federal Reserve. Bank regulation means Glass-Steagall. It means that we protect the commercial banks, which provide credit for entrepreneurs and businesses and industry and for economic development, and not for speculators. The speculators, as I said, can speculate to their heart's content. They just have to eat their own losses. Now, this is the first of LaRouche's 4 laws, Glass-Steagall. Look it up, study it. It worked to prevent banking crises from 1933 until it was repealed in 1999. And since then, what have we had? One bubble after another, and now the everything bubble is collapsing. It also includes a credit system, Hamiltonian credit, which provides credit to those who produce. Physical economy, whether it's infrastructure, which is the third of his 4 laws, or industry, research and development, education. These are the areas where we need investment, not to back up speculators who are taking over companies that have high stock value but produce nothing. And the fourth of his laws is investment in the technologies of the future. As we just heard from Lavrov, nuclear technology, cooperation with China, nuclear fusion. There are breakthroughs taking place almost every week in nuclear fusion. This is the energy of the future, not solar and windmill. So these 4 laws, Glass-Steagall regulation, a Hamiltonian credit system, investment in new platforms of infrastructure, and investment at the frontiers of science and technology. That's the solution. Not war. Not war to destroy nations and force them to be subservient to a collapsing system. So those of you who want to be part of this, sign up at the link at the bottom of the description page to register for the online Schiller Institute conference, which takes place tomorrow, May 26th, to discuss how to overcome the lunatics who are pushing for nuclear war. Sign up for it, send it around to your contacts, your friends, and send this video around. We must have a mobilization of real patriots with real solutions. That's what we're fighting for, and I ask you to join us in doing that.